You are listening to the Two and Out CFL podcast, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network.
Travis Currah, Sheldon Jones, we are ready to rock for week 2 of the 2024 CFL season. But man, there's some big news in the sports world. I know it's a Canadian Football League podcast, but the big news this week was that the 4th of July Nathan's hot dog eating contest will not include the GOAT. Jaws, Joey Chestnut, the most dominant athlete on planet Earth, because of a deal I guess he signed with Impossible Meats. It's all to do with what, sponsorships? Sheldon, am I right on that?
Well, I thought so. There's all these differing reports, but right before we got on here, I actually went to Joey's Twitter, and he said that it's actually Nathan's who's saying he can't do it. Because they want to make everything going forward exclusive. It hasn't been exclusive until now, but apparently they're changing the rules, and now they want it to be everyone who's competing to be exclusive, which doesn't make sense to me, but some news just dropped just a few minutes ago that is very exciting.
We talk about Labor Day classics, and this week it's crazy. Touchdown Pacific, REDBLACKS Lions in Victoria, BC, Riders Bombers in Regina, Ticats Argos in Hamilton, Stampeders Elks in Calgary, and Kobayashi Chestnut on Netflix. This might be the best Labor Day weekend of all time, Sheldon Jones.
Yes, and hopefully it works out so that it's before the Rider game starts, so when we're hanging out, drinking some beers before the game, we're sitting there watching that. Because the two GOATs... Like, this is like if Tom Brady played Michael Jordan in something.
I'm still putting Jaws at about a minus 500 here. I still think he's the favorite, yeah.
Has Kobayashi been actually competitive eating? Like, I thought he retired, so I don't even know.
I'm in for this.
Yeah,
so in.
Let's start a Joey Chestnut podcast, come on.
Oh, man. Well, welcome to another episode of the show. And during the early part of the CFL season, it's always exciting. There's always an influx of new viewers. And when we look at the YouTube analytics, almost 30% of the viewership is coming from the United States. And that is a little hard to remember sometimes. But I just want to feature a comment that we got on the channel recently from Jason. It says he fulfilled the childhood dream of going to an Argos game just this past week against the Lions. He got to see a pretty big win. He's from Michigan, but originally from Maine. It was the most fun he's had at a football game, he's pretty sure. He's now hooked. He found Two and Out. He's subscribed and can't wait to follow an entire season of CFL football. Well, welcome to Two and Out Nation, or as we call it, Two and Out Hamlet, once in a while on the show. But that's pretty cool to hear, man.
It's very cool. And we also got another thing like yesterday on our Twitter from Jake, who listens to our podcast in Australia. So like that's insane. Insane. Thank you, Jake. Thank you, everyone. Stick with us because we got more coming.
Yeah, we're going to tell you later in the show how you can support Two and Out in a new and exciting way. I think this is pretty darn cool. We've never done anything like this, so we'll talk about that later in the show. But right now, we'll get to the CFL news, and this is pretty big. The Argos releasing Shawk Oakman, who over 3 seasons has 18 sacks from Baylor, 6'9", a monster of a man. I think, there was a lot of talk, Sheldon, this offseason that Oakman might be available as a free agent, and he might have gotten a lot of looks from teams, but he ended up staying in Toronto. Now he's available again. Now, the Argos D-line, they also released Benoit Marion, a Canadian defensive lineman who was already signed in Hamilton. But in the offseason, they lost Brandon Barlow, they lost Dwayne Hendricks. But they were still incredible against the Lions this week. So that does go to show you the depth that they have at D-line. But there's got to be something more to this story as well.
Yeah, like you don't just release a guy like Shawk Oakman like for nothing, right? You'd at least try to trade him to get like, a seventh round pick or something. So something obviously happened, whether, he had a clash with the coach, maybe he wasn't happy with what he was getting asked to do. Like we've seen stuff like that happen before where players have signed or re-signed and then the coach has decided, like, it just takes me back to when the Riders signed Justin Capicotti and Sean Lemon when Chris Jones first took over, and then he wanted them to play out of position. So, and then it just didn't work out, right? So it's interesting, and I the CFL is better when you have those monster players playing and getting sacks. So I hope some team picks up Shawk Oakman. It'll be very interesting to see if the Riders try to, because of the Corey Mace history there. But the Riders defense of Lion looked okay, actually. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I hope someone can sign Shawk Oakman because I like seeing that guy play.
I don't think he comes cheap. I got to meet him briefly in Niagara Falls right after the CFL Player Awards last year. Yeah. I kind of wonder if BC would be a team that would be looking his way. I think they are a team that does need some help in the trenches, but we'll see where he lands. I don't think he'll be on the market for too long. This is something I want to mention. There's a new documentary following Andrew Harris, and it's called Running Back Relentless, and the red carpet premiere is happening in Toronto this Friday. I just want to mention this because it's actually going to be on Apple TV, Amazon Prime, and Google Play next week. So on the 20th, that's going to be available to watch, but it follows him during the last year of his career with the Argos, and watching the trailer, they don't shy away from the whole scandal, the performance enhancing stuff while he was in Winnipeg. I just love that this is happening for a CFL player. Just having more content like this following the Canadian Football League is really exciting. I'm not going to be at the red carpet premiere. I'm not made for a red carpet, but I'm excited to see this when it hits streaming services next week. I think it's going to be a cool thing to watch, man.
Yeah, any sort of exposure on those big platforms that the CFL can get is amazing. It would be remiss if I didn't throw in a comment here. So maybe we'll actually find out if those tainted substances were actually tainted, and he has some proof. So maybe I doubt it, but no, I'm actually really looking forward to watching this because, like I said, any content out there is amazing, and for it to be on Apple Plus, like that's pretty big. So hopefully it does well. Hopefully streaming numbers are up there, and we get to see more of this kind of thing.
Power rankings are always a point of contention online, leading up to games. And you ended up coming out with your new updated power rankings after week 1.
I did.
Do you have them in front of you? Do you want me to go through these right now? Okay, so
I got them.
Quickly go through the power rankings right now, 1 through 9.
1 through 9. So again, Montreal stays at number 1. They were there last week. Toronto was moved up to number 2. They were 6th last week. I just thought that them beating BC was just completely unexpected, and so that warranted the move there. I had the Riders moving up 1 spot to 3. Again, the sloppy game, but they won in Commonwealth, which is not something that's very easy for the Riders to do. It's always a close game there, and they capitalized and had a huge fourth quarter. BC, I still have him at 4th. VA still played pretty well other than a couple turnovers, but he didn't have a lot of blocking, so hopefully they can shore that up for him. I have Calgary number 5, so they went from last to number 5, so that's quite a jump. Not the biggest jump or drop that I'm going to explain here soon, but Jake Mayer looked good. His receivers helped him out, and they were an underdog at home and they still won, so that's good. Hamilton, I have them ranked at 6. They were last ranked at 8, so they still moved up even in a loss. But honestly, if Bo didn't have Tim White drop a couple passes that could have been touchdowns, they might have won that game. So they still looked pretty good. Ottawa stays at 7 because they were on bye. I'm not going to move a team. If you're on a bye, I'm not moving you. Edmonton, they were fifth. They go down to eighth just because, they seem to fumble away that game there. Uh, we'll see what happens there. And then, this is controversial, but I don't care. Winnipeg is last, and they're last because they scored the least amount of points this week. They got beat by the most amount of points this week. They lost at home, which is something that very rarely happens. And they looked like garbage. So, you know what? A lot of people are saying this is a troll thing. It's not. I like the comments that are coming from it, but Winnipeg played like crap. This is power rankings. This isn't standings. So they are at ninth right now. I'm sure they're not going to stay there. But that's just how it shook out for me.
Oh man, I love this. If you want to yell at Sheldon, 2andout.ca, the number 2andout.ca. The article's up there. You can leave the comment there or go on X at 2andout CFL to talk about these power rankings. Week 2 has arrived, and hopefully the momentum keeps up in the CFL, because Week 1 viewership was up 22% from last year, and I think over a quarter since 2021. Man, this is pretty darn good news, I think, for the CFL. But it starts with Winnipeg currently 6.5 point favorites over the Ottawa REDBLACKS. Now the over-under is set at 46.5. Henry Burris is going to be in the house for a return to Ottawa as they kind of celebrate the 10th season of Canadian football being back in the nation's capital. This is a really fascinating game with Drew Brown getting his first CFL start for Ottawa against his old team, a team where he backed up in Winnipeg. Just from first glance, this is a pretty intriguing matchup with, I think, injuries affecting both sides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you always, when you have that dynamic of the backup quarterback playing his team, there's always that extra fire for that quarterback, right? And when Drew started those 2 games in Winnipeg, he had 9 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. Now I know Winnipeg's team was just amazing around him, and he had all those weapons, but still, for a backup quarterback to come in there and throw 9 touchdowns in 2 games, that's pretty damn impressive.
Well, he actually came into a game last year. They were trailing in Edmonton, down 22-0.
Right.
Collaros gets hit. Brown comes in and
Right.
lights up the Elks for 4 touchdowns. That's quite the performance, man.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting as to that. Like you said, injuries. No Brady Oliveira for the Bombers, and Kenny the King Lawler is on the 6th game with a broken arm. So that's 2 of their biggest weapons that they do not have now. I'm very interested to see how Johnny Augustine looks, because he looked actually pretty good in the preseason from when he was playing there. And he's a $2,500 player this week in fantasy. Just a heads up. That might change, but right now he's $2,500.
Kenny the King Lawler on the 6-game injured list with a broken arm. So coming into his place on the roster is going to be Carrick Wheatfall out of Fresno State. He did have a cup of coffee with the Philadelphia Eagles, but looks to be making his CFL debut with the Bombers against Ottawa this week. And then Adam Bighill is going to be activated off of the 6-game injured list, which whether he has lost a step or some speed or not, I think without a doubt he's the quarterback and the leader on the defense. So having him back on the field for the Bombers is big. We saw that he played in the Grey Cup not at 100%, and the Alouettes did burn him on a few occasions there. He didn't play last week against the Owls, but he'll be back out there for the Bombers here Thursday against the REDBLACKS. The REDBLACKS experiencing some injuries in the back end of their defense, so they've signed Winston Rose to the practice roster. I'm sure they're going to need him on the field, but 2-time Grey Cup champ with the Bombers, an all-star in 2019. He ended up having 18 interceptions in 70 career games. So a veteran presence in the secondary with Brandon Dandridge and Justin Howell both set to miss this game. They've also added veteran Sherrod Baltimore back to the team. He's been a long time Ottawa Red Black there, but this kind of seems like an opportunity. If they can't pressure Collaros, he's still very capable, and with Dalton Schoen and Dembski and Wolotarski, and hey, I don't know if Wheatfall is going to have an impact right off the bat here, but that has to be a concern for the Red Blacks defense with all the changes and injuries in the secondary.
Yeah, it's a game where you're gonna have, with all these players sitting out, you're gonna have these new opportunities for these new players to step up and see what they can do. So that's just another wild card that we as fans get to enjoy. It'll be interesting to see how their play calling is affected with Augustine in there instead of Oliveira, and then also on Ottawa how they're gonna, defend when they're down those two players. So it's gonna be like a nice chess match kind of game with when you have this many stars that are out.
I guess Ottawa's got a question mark at running back as well because Devontae Williams in the offseason tearing his Achilles. So they have Raquel Armstead listed as the starting running back, but he's a game-time decision. Devontae Dedmon absolutely electric in the return game, but he's been taking a lot of the snaps at running back in practice. So maybe he'll have to step in at running back this week. It's a little bit different taking, snaps back there than returning kicks.
True, but if he can get to that second level and get out in space, like, he's gone, right? Yeah. So if Ottawa's offensive line can, try to mitigate the Willie Jeffersons and Bighills and all that stuff, like if they can actually get a solid push off the line and get him in a hole, if he's the guy there, I could see him getting a lot of yards. Now
the question mark is the dominance over for Winnipeg. They're even talking about this in Winnipeg. 4 straight Grey Cup championships appearances. 2 straight Grey Cup losses, 2 wins before that. But man, the past few seasons, they got off to a really fast start. So all of a sudden, 0-1 Winnipeg, the talk is the dominance over? Are things slowing down? They are the oldest roster in the CFL. Week 1, there's always overreaction theater happening across the league. I personally expect them to rebound with a week 2 win against Ottawa. I don't know. I still see it ending in a home playoff game at Princess Auto Stadium after all 18 games. I don't think they're going to be 3rd, 4th, 5th in the West, but maybe they aren't as dominant as they once were, with the rest of the teams kind of catching up.
Well, like you said, the other teams are catching up. They're getting older. I'm not willing to say that the dominance is over after one game, but when you're a fan base that is used to being, winning, especially at home, winning, and then you see this happen where they just lay an egg, it's frustrating, but that's what tends those overreactions to happen as quickly as they are. Like, I'm pretty sure they were getting booed in that game at some points, and that's pretty rough to be booing, a Grey Cup finalist 4 years in a row, 2 of them winning. You're booing them in the first game at home. I get it. What are you doing for me now?
For those expectations to be you better be performing every week,
There's already people on Rider fans saying that AJ Ouellette is a bust after one game. People are, and that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. We'll talk about that more later. But overreaction happens. It's the small minority of fans. We're wrestling fans. We know what wrestling internet, the IWC is. It's very toxic. It's very ridiculous. But that's only the minority, right? And so that's what these fans on the fan boards and Twitter, and I'm on them too, so I'm one of them, so I get it. But I think it's not time to panic in Winnipeg yet. But if this happens, 2 or 3 or 4 games in a row where they're, if they're 1-3 after 4 games, then yeah, then maybe maybe it's time to panic. But after one game and you got an Ottawa team who's not ranked very highly in the preseason power rankings, like this is the perfect scenario for Winnipeg to come out and destroy Ottawa, right? And get that confidence back. But we'll see what happens.
Friday Night Football has the reigning Grey Cup champs coming off a decisive win against those Winnipeg Blue Bombers, heading to Edmonton as 5.5-point favorites. The over-under is 48.5 here, but the Alouettes are also going to have their depth tested. Tyrell Richards, the linebacker, has hit the 6-game injured list with a calf injury. We also know that Reggie Stubblefield, the linebacker, is he's done for the season with a torn ACL. Receiver Tyler Sneed, who was actually just extended through 2025, became a big part of that Alouettes offense last year. I guess he had a walking boot on. He's going to be out several weeks there. I mean, is this an opportunity for, I don't know if you want to say opportunity for Tyson Philpott. I think this guy has 1,000-yard season written all over him. Coming into that Alouettes offense last year, and then the Grey Cup winning touchdown, 2 touchdowns last week, the first one of the season, and then that 76-yard flea flicker. I don't know, teams will be able to probably key in on him when guys like Sneed are going to be missing, and they'll start to be looking at Tyson Philpott, as a number 1, a number 2 option in the offense. But that's when we'll find out what he's made out of, right? I think if he's going to be playing the top corners in the league and he's still going to be putting up those numbers, this is an opportunity for him to be a legit star in the CFL if he isn't already.
Yeah, he had a monster week, and he's going to be getting those double teams now, but when you have a player like that, he's so dynamic and he's just shifty, and he's a small guy who can get in those open spaces, and Cody can fire it in there. He's a pretty accurate passer when it's the short routes, and then went back in 2019, he was actually the most accurate long ball thrower too. I know he lost a little bit of that the past couple of years in Riderville, or the last year in Riderville, but Cody, he's playing fired up. He's coming off winning the Grey Cup. You can tell that he's confident in himself. And I think he was lacking that before. He has that confidence now, and he's just going to be slinging the ball out there. And it's going to be up to Edmonton to see if they can stop that.
Fans in Montreal were getting excited about Reggie White Jr. before, having an injury-limited season last year, and he's getting set for a return here. He's been suffering a rib injury. He's been removed from the 6-game injured list. I don't think he's going to be playing against Edmonton, but he's probably going to be in the lineup right away, which is good timing, especially with Tyler Sneed being out for a little bit here. But Charleston Rambo had some looks last week for the Alouettes, and maybe Cole Speaker is going to be able to make an impact with that receiving core. What I am kind of concerned about is the running game. They really didn't get much going against Winnipeg, and Edmonton was really able to limit Saskatchewan's running game last week. So Walter Fletcher is going to be in tough this week against Chris Jones and that Edmonton Elks defense. Well, let's talk about the Elks and the offense. Some pretty tough news as Kyron Moore has been ruled out for the season with a torn ACL. And I know he was excited, the team was excited that Swerve is going to be having a more of a feature role in the offense this year, and I guess it wasn't meant to be, but I think the Elks have actually found themselves a pretty good veteran receiver that is going to be able to get in there and make an impact right away in Tevin Jones, who last year had 65 catches, 882 yards, 3 touchdowns with the Riders. Now, he started this offseason off in Montreal, and ended up being one of the final cuts with that team. But he's going to be able to slide in for the Elks, and I think be able to contribute right off the bat for them.
Yeah, it's really tough seeing Kyron Moore out because he's so exciting when he gets the ball. And Tevin Jones, he made a couple miraculous catches last year in Saskatchewan. He did unfortunately have some fumble issues too, so it'll be interesting to see if he's locked that up. But when you can plug a veteran in like that who has experience, almost 1,000 yards, he's going to be a good target. And McLeod Bethel-Thompson is the quarterback you want throwing you the ball, right? He's very accurate, and he's that game manager, and he looked still pretty good last week. A couple of interceptions weren't his fault, I don't think. So it'll be interesting to see how they can replace the Kyron Moore kind of offense, because he's a younger, speedier receiver, and Tevin Jones is a taller, lankier guy. So I'm not sure that he's going to be able to slot in that exact position. But maybe this is not silly, but maybe Javon Leake gets some looks on offense as that little speedy guy. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, he was already in the offense a little bit last week, I think. So,
yeah.
That's not really too far-fetched, man.
I guess so, yeah. I forgot about that.
See, validating you a little bit. The Elks did end up signing national defensive back Josh Haggerty, who recently played with the Argos, about 30 games over a couple years. And they're going to be, you want to talk about leaders on defense, quarterbacks of the defense. I think that's what Luchez Purifoy is for the Edmonton Elks. He's been playing in that Chris Jones system for a while. He did it in Saskatchewan. Now he's doing it in Edmonton. He missed last week's game with an illness. They haven't 100% confirmed that he's going to be playing this week, but he's back at practice. That's good news for Edmonton to have him back in the lineup. But this one, I don't want to say that every game that the Elks are just desperate for a win, but it kind of feels that way. With the money being lost and, all that kind of stuff. It feels like they need to... Well, Chris Jones needs to string some wins together to save his job, right?
For sure.
And there's an opportunity here. I know the Alouettes looked fantastic against the Bombers, but now with some injury issues creeping in, their depth being tested a little bit, obviously the Elks have an opportunity, but also... Don't you need to find a way to relax? Once you start to get desperate for a win, you start to make more and more mistakes. I think that's what McLeod Bethel-Thompson brings to the team, that calm, that sort of leadership ability that he brings for them. But it feels like, man, the Elks really don't want to go 0-2,
No, and especially with Winnipeg and BC losing last week, that opens up the entire West Division, because if you can get a couple wins here, and if BC or Winnipeg loses again, then that those later season matchups when they play each other will mean a lot more, and you have a leg up on them, right? So you don't want to go 0-2 in a strong Western Division,
especially with those two games being at home.
Oh, for sure.
They need to start winning at Commonwealth on a regular basis.
Yeah, I know. At least there's no Oiler game on Friday to take anyone in Edmonton's, away from them, right? So, but I hope that there's I hope the crowd's there. They're loud. They're ready to go. And I obviously don't want Edmonton to win, but I hope that they can for their fan base.
Well, it's BC Lions week in Vancouver, where they're home to the Calgary Stampeders. They are big favorites here, too. 8.5 points. The over-under is set at 50.5. Maybe I'm hyping this, but this might be the biggest regular season home field advantage we've seen in a while. 50 Cent playing the pregame concert. Over 50,000 tickets sold. And when BC Place is full, that place gets loud. This is going to be, I think, a spectacle in Vancouver on Saturday. I'm so excited for fans on the West Coast. I'm so excited for people to get to attend this game. It does kind of feel like all the pressure is on the Lions right now, but this feels like a serious home field advantage on Saturday, man.
Yeah, it's a huge home field advantage, but I just hope that the 50-cent part isn't a distraction to the players, because I'm sure they'll be locked in, but I'm sure there's also going to be some players who are going to be trying to sneak out of the locker room to try to, hear into club or something, right? So it's tough though, because as a professional, you gotta take yourself away from that. You gotta dial in. You have to, especially coming off a loss when you were heavily favored to beat the Argos and you lost, right? So kind of a perfect scenario for them. Calgary comes in, they'll be riding a little higher than they would have been if they lost, right? And but they almost did lose. So hopefully the receivers can continue to catch Jake's balls, because Jake looked good. I'll admit it. He looked really good. And if he can maintain that, then Calgary can maybe get back to the way they were, the team that's always in the playoffs and stuff like that. But I don't know. I just don't want this to seem like a trap game for BC, because they think that everything is going their way because they have 50,000 people. And the last thing you want to do is lay a stinker when you have 50,000 people there, because you want those 50,000 people to come back.
Vernon Adams Jr. had a nicked up hand in that first game against the Argos. You could see he was favoring it here and there. His x-rays have come back negative. He looks good to go against Calgary. But, man, I don't know if the Lions are really strong on short yardage right now. They're I don't know if their offensive line is getting the proper push on short yardage. And how do you feel about your starting quarterback that has had a little bit of injury issues getting in there? Basically, a rugby scrum with pads on short yardage. I don't know if it seems like the smartest idea to still have him taking those snaps, but I don't know if they have a short yardage specialist on the roster. I know Prukop can do it. Dolagala is 6'7", but still, it's there's no real specialists on the BC roster.
Well, you had Prukop, and then you cut him because he's in Edmonton now.
Yeah.
And Jake Dolagala, 6'7", you would think he would be able to walk over there and just reach over the line and get the ball and get the first down, right? But there's not another team in the league that's using their starting quarterback as their short yardage quarterback. So, no, I don't think it's smart. And Vernon Adams can be very dangerous with his legs, but I don't know if you want to be doing a bunch of design running with him or sneaking with him, because he becomes more susceptible to injuries. When he's, scrambling in the pocket and there's open space in the field and he can, zip and zag up all the field, that's when you want to use that ability that he has. So no, I don't think it's smart, and I hope that they realize that they shouldn't be doing that. But again, maybe you're right. Maybe it's an O-line issue, and they feel like Vernon still gives them the best chance just because of how quick he is. And I just hope it doesn't bite them in the butt, because, Vernon Adams came into this year as pretty much the odds-on favorite to be the MOP, and I don't want to see him getting injured in week 2 doing a quarterback sneak.
Are the Lions going to be able to get after Jake Maier? They need to. I think Jake Maier comes in with some real confidence after what he was able to do and the Stamps were able to do against the Ticats. He comes in as the number 1 rated player from Pro Football Focus. He had a really good week, but what the Stamps also did very well against the Ticats was run the ball. And they were able to do that pretty well. Now, Dedrick Mills comes in. They had Emmons as well. They might be running right at the Lions and testing that front and keeping them guessing against the Stamps. They come in as underdogs here. Everybody's got them written off. I think everybody still has Jake written off here. There's an opportunity for the Stamps. Like, if they go 2-0 and the Lions are 0-2...
Yeah, that'll be huge.
I would have said you were crazy if you would have told me that 3 weeks ago,
100%. It's just and that's what they need to do, though. They need to feel like, again, just like Edmonton can't go 0-2, BC can't go 0-2, but if you're Calgary, if you can go 2-0, and exactly like you said, they've been written off. You can shut a lot of people, including me, up because I haven't been, very fair on them, I guess. But again, they looked good. BC, they gave up a lot of plays in Toronto. If I'm Calgary, I'm running it right up their throat to see if they can stop it, because as soon as you do that, then they have to key on the running, and then it opens up the passing. It's just what Saskatchewan did in Edmonton. They weren't having success on the ground, but Mark Mueller kept going to the ground because he knew that would give his receivers space. So if David Dickinson, who came from who was the guy who's taught Mark Mueller everything he knows, he's going to know to do that too, right? So and Jake Mayer has an arm. He can throw it deep, and if those players can catch the ball, like Reggie Bagleton can snatch everything out of that he wants. So it'll just be very, very critical for them to get that win there, I think, because once you're riding on that high of beating Hamilton at home, and then if you just go into BC and get the crap kicked out of you in front of 50,000 people, that becomes a little bit demoralizing, and then you have to go back to square one. So if I'm Calgary, just ram it down their throat and try to humble them in their own place.
Yeah, and try to shut up the crowd early and often. That'll be the big challenge for them. Cam Eccles had a great debut for the Stampeders last week at receiver, and it does look like Jalen Philpott dealing with that hamstring a little bit this week again. I don't know if he's going to miss the game, but that is certainly something to watch for. That soft tissue stuff, sometimes you can't predict how that's going to heal, and it seems to come back. So hopefully he's taking care of that. And then if he misses, hopefully he's back on the field soon. I do want to see if the Lions can run the ball as well. Last week, Calgary got ran all over by James Butler. Like, the guy was getting 9 yards a carry. So is William Stanback going to have the same success against the Stampeders? That's an interesting matchup to me. Will the Lions be able to open up the holes? And they don't have the offensive line that Hamilton does. They were ranked number 1 by Pro Football Focus this week. But the Lions do need to get a running game going as well. And if Hamilton was able to torch Calgary like that, maybe the Lions are going to be able to piggyback off their game plan a little bit. Speaking of those Ticats, they are 1.5 point favorites over the Riders. Sunday night football, the over-under at 48 as the 1-0 green and white head to Hamilton this week, coming off that loss against Calgary. There was some pretty good news that Ticat fans are kind of excited to see. Taulia Tagovailoa. Taulia Tagovailoa. There we go. He ends up signing to the practice roster for the Ticats. He backed up his older brother, Tua, who... I dropped my microphone. I'm so excited about this. He backed up his older brother, Tua, who's now with the Miami Dolphins, and Mac Jones at Alabama before he transferred to the University of Maryland and had a great NCAA career. He holds the Big Ten record for the most career passing yards, 11,256, and the best completion percentage among passers with at least 875 attempts with 67.1%. Now, he didn't get drafted in the NFL draft. He attended Seattle Seahawks minicamp, wasn't offered a contract. But some Ticat fans are pretty excited about this news now that he's property of Hamilton, Sheldon.
Yeah, and why wouldn't you be excited? You see his brother, and you see the success there, and of course he's has that name value to him, right? And I hope, I hope that like Bo doesn't go down, and you know Powell doesn't go down, and there's no real reason for the Tiger Cats to actually have Taulia actually play for them this season. But Bo is getting older, right? He's only a couple of years, 1 or 2 years away from being on the panel at TSN. So I think it's a good depth signing for the future. And with his university stats there, that's super impressive. And if he can, like, just imagine what he can do on a bigger field in a pass happy league, right? Like that if I was a Ticat fan, I'd be pretty excited about that too.
We talk about the trenches a lot on the show. It's obviously it's big with how a football team is going to perform. I think it's critical that the Riders pressure Bo Levi Mitchell. At times, it didn't seem like they were able to get to McLeod Bethel Thompson last week. And there were times when he was able to find soft spots in the zone, especially the middle of the field. And I think Bo could excel with that. And receivers like Tim White, they will torch you up the middle all game long.
If they catch the ball.
So the Riders, really, I think they need to get to Bo Levi Mitchell, which with that decent offense, not decent, I'd say exceptional O-line in Hamilton, it's going to be quite the challenge for them. But the Riders do excel against the run. At least they did against Edmonton and so far this season. And that is another strength of that Ticat team. They need to go. They need to have James Butler rolling. That obviously is a challenge against Corey Mace's unit, Sheldon.
But first day of practice here in Regina, Thurman wasn't there. They were doing a lot of shuffling on the D. Apparently, they're trying to find a way to get Marcus Sales in there. So I don't know what they're gonna do, but I wouldn't say I'm worried per se about Calgary's rushing, because I think Corey Mace is really good at against the run, like he was this last week here. But Bo is pretty much the same kind of quarterback as McLeod Bethel Thompson. He gets the ball out of there pretty quickly, and he finds those spots. So it's crucial that he does get pressured, because Bo is also the type of player that when he gets rattled, when he gets sacked a couple of times, that's when he starts to overthrow the ball, and the interceptions happen. So it's imperative that the Riders do pressure. But in the Edmonton game, it seemed like, and in the preseason, to be honest, it seemed like the Riders defense was a lot of bend but don't break. They may have gave up quite a bit of yards in some of the circumstances, but they also made the team settle for a lot of field goals instead of touchdowns. So I'm hoping for the same in this game. But Hamilton's a tough place to play for the away teams. Even in the offseason, I remember a video. It wasn't actually in the offseason. It was only a couple weeks ago on CFL.ca, and they were asking AJ Ouellette who the worst fans are that get on the opposing players, and he said Hamilton. So the fans are loud there. They get
and he was an Argo that literally took a Thor hammer to the end zone. So I don't know if Ticat fans appreciate that.
For sure, and they're gonna remember that, right? Like, just because he's wearing green, and I hope he brings the hammer. I hope he does. That would be awesome. But I'm just saying, like, even if you're not playing, even if it's not Toronto, Hamilton fans are passionate. They're loud. They know when to cheer. Yeah. They know when to not cheer. So it's not a great environment as if you're the visiting team. So it'll be fun to watch how Corey Mace, and that's the other thing. Corey Mace is very experienced going up against Hamilton. They played 4 times last year, and I'm pretty sure Toronto won at least 3 of those games. I can't remember if they won them all, but I know for sure they won 3 of those games. So it's a good matchup. That's all I'm going to say. It's a good matchup.
Well, and the betting line shows it, like a 1.5 point spread means that nobody really is favored. Really, it's just given a few points to the home team. Basically, you did mention shuffles on Saskatchewan's defense. It's early in the practice week. The game's not until Sunday, but Nelson Lacombo was in at safety for Jaden Dalkey. So I don't know if there's any injury issues going on there, or maybe
it's the penalty.
I was gonna say discipline for playing like a goofball at times.
Well, when you were there, did you see what Dalkey actually did?
No, I was watching the Roland Milligan celebration. I actually almost kind of thought that he got the penalty, but Dalkey was talking all game. Actually, the Rider defense was talking all game. So we'll see if it's a practice thing or if it's going to spill over into the game. Where they want him to behave himself on the field and kind of keep it between the whistles, but that's a change from the Riders. They were taking a lot more serious penalties than that with no repercussions in the past. So we'll see what Corey Mace brings to the table in that regard.
There's only one word to describe Craig Dickinson, and I'll spell it out for you. I was joking.
Were you going to say SAWFT?
Of course. Yeah. Hopefully Logan Ferland isn't punching anybody this game, because we need him in there. Because honestly, against Edmonton, the Riders had the momentum. Ferland gets kicked out, and then, a cold Sevier comes in off the bench and, lets in 2 sacks pretty much back to back. And there goes momentum. So I have faith that Corey Mace is going to be able to, wrap those guys up. Again, we talked about this in the review show. Only one penalty in that second half after, a pretty undisciplined half of football. So I'm very, very excited for this game, because I think it's going to be a really fun one to watch.
Riders,
and like I was saying,
Ticats.
sorry. Like what I was saying before against AJ Ouellette and people on Rider fans saying that he should be cut already. When AJ Ouellette is in there and he's getting the defenses to key in on him, all that does is open up what happened with Sean Bain Jr. getting 3 touchdowns, right? So even if AJ's not getting 100 yards a game and 4 touchdowns a game, that just him being in there and being a weapon that the defensive coordinators need to look at, that's like half of what you pay the guy for, right? So I just had to get that off my chest.
Well, and I talk about the Riders needing to, pressure Bo, vice versa too.
Yeah.
Like Jake Mayer had a good game against the Ticats, and are the Ticats going to allow Trevor Harris to do the same? He's a dangerous quarterback, and if you give him time, he's even more dangerous. You talked about Sean Bain Jr. It seems like that is a connection that maybe defense are going to really need to look out for as the season goes on. But either way, I always love a Bo and a Saskatchewan matchup. That's always fun. I always love a Hamilton and a Saskatchewan matchup as well. So the Sunday Nighter, 2 straight Sunday Nighters between the two teams, as it's a home and home here. Man, I'll try to decide who I'm going to lock my pick on before we do fantasy lineups and pick them. But Sheldon Jones, there's a new way that people can support 2 and Out now. So let us know what you've come up with. I honestly, this is a surprise to me too.
Yeah, it's just I've seen some of the other podcasts like Piffles and Turf District. They have a merch store, and so I've been tooling around with this for a few months here, trying to make sure I can get everything looking good and on a good platform here. So I have made that live today. So it's on Spreadshop. We're gonna put the little right about here. No, we're gonna put the link up on the YouTube video here and in our
You're right.
description.
I don't know. I can't do that, but I'll put it in the description.
Yeah. In the description, and then we'll have a link to it on our website.
Yeah,
We're
there
gonna put
we
it out
go.
on social media, all that kind of stuff. And as a special offer to our valuable Two and Out listeners, for the next 2 weeks, 14 days, 25% off the whole store. So
25%.
25% off. Yeah.
That comes out of your paycheck, Sheldon.
Hey, I didn't select it. It just automatically was applied when I opened the shop. So,
and apparently we already have a sale or two, so feel free to give a shout out. Give a shout out.
A good listener who shall not be named. No, I'm just kidding. It's Joe. Joe has already supported us by getting a nice coffee mug and a nice hat. So I also mocked up a little alternate logo. You know, we've had these alternate jerseys from these teams not leaked, but revealed. So,
yeah.
You know, I had a little fun. You know, it's up there so that you can get the OG logo or you can get this new alternate logo. There's shirts, there's hats, there's coffee mugs, there's a little teddy bear, there's, you know, a lot of stuff. And if you guys find something that is not on there that you want, chances are I could put it on there. So just let us know in the comments.
Two and Out merch available now. I love it. I love it. You can join us for fantasy football and pick 'em as well. My lineup has Vernon Adams Jr. as my quarterback and my captain. So double the points. I'm going all in on him. I've got Dedrick Mills and AJ Ouellette as my running backs. Jareth Stearns of the Riders, I've got him as a receiver. Justin McInnes of the Lions, I liked what he did. And I've got Justin Hardy of the Ottawa REDBLACKS. First 1,000-yard season last year. I think he's going to have a good season with Ottawa, and that starts against Winnipeg. We'll see how he does, but I do have the Bomber defense going against myself, but that's $0 left.
Hey, there you go.
My roster. So even if it doesn't perform on the field, I know that I did perform well with math.
There you
what's
go.
Your roster looking like?
So I'm looking for a bounce back game for Zach. Zach Caleros, he's my quarterback. Running back, again, I think I've taken AJ Ouellette every single week. He hasn't had a bye in the past season, and now I'm keeping going. He's my captain. Again, second running back is William Stanback. Just seeing how Butler ran over the Stamps, I'm hoping that William can do that here too. For receivers, I got Tyson Philpott, and Sean Bain Jr. I'm doing the thing that you're not supposed to do in fantasy. I'm chasing a good week, so I don't know if that's going to work out for me or not, but I hope so. And then my flex, I said it earlier, $2,500 for a starting running back in Johnny Augustine. I think I'll be able to get some value out of that. And I'm taking the Riders defense. I had $600,000 left over.
$600.
Is it 600? Oh, yeah, sorry. 600. 600 imaginary CFL TSN dollars.
All right. Week 2 predictions, Sheldon Jones. We made the same pick, so I'm just going to go through it pretty quickly here. The Bombers are 6.5-point favorites in Ottawa. The Alouettes are 5.5-point favorites in Edmonton. The BC Lions are 8.5-point favorites against the Calgary Stampeders at home. The Lions at home, and the Riders visit Hamilton, where the Ticats are 1.5-point favorites. We have both picked the Bombers, the Alouettes, the Lions, and the Riders. Which game are you least confident in, Sheldon? For me, it's probably the Rider-Ticat game.
Yeah, Rider Ticats or Montreal Edmonton, because I think Edmonton might be able to. I don't know. Honestly, Ottawa, like Drew Brown, Winnipeg, they're going to look to get better. But honestly, I think this is a really good week of football because I could see every team winning in a certain situation, right? So sorry, my answer is I don't really have one.
Oh man, have you considered running for office, Sheldon Jones?
I have. I've been told I should, but I would be canceled as soon as old tweets are looked at. So, not in the cards.
You and me both, brother. You and me both. Week 2 of the 2024 CFL season is upon us. You can now support Two and Out by buying merch. Do I have to buy a coffee mug, or does it just show up, Sheldon?
I don't know.
Oh,
We'll see. No, you have to
my
buy
address?
it. You have to buy it. But
okay.
The good thing for us is we get to buy it for the cheap price. We get a discount on our own stuff. So there. Yeah.
Wow. I like that. So you can support Two and Out that way. You can support the show on Patreon and subscribe, comment on YouTube, and hey, any podcatcher, just a heads up, we're about 10 days away from Google Podcasts shutting down. So if you get the show there or any of your shows there, you're going to have to go to Apple or Spotify or wherever. There's like 800 podcast platforms. So get the show there. For Sheldon Jones, I'm Travis Currah. Enjoy week 2 of CFL action. We'll talk to you next week to recap it all.
Thanks for listening. Find more great shows like this at CF Pod Network on Twitter.